Hello, everyone. We're gonna wait a couple of minutes until everybody joins. But a quick intro from me. I'm Nadia, Head of Business Development here today with you as your host, and we have an amazing Steve joining us today. For all of you tuning in from Europe, grab your coffee. I hope you had an amazing, successful day. Sit on your couch, get relaxed. We're gonna have an amazing chat today. And for all of you tuning in from across the pond, good morning to you all. Grab your coffee. Hopefully, this talk with Steve is going to inspire you today and make sure you have the most productive day today. So today we have Steve on the call with us. We're going to have an amazing chat about field sales, how it's changed in the last year after a pandemic, and all the stressful period that we've had over the last year. Steve is the CEO and founder of Badger Maps, the #1 app on the App Store that is specifically built for all of you field salespeople out there. For salespeople that are watching and listening to us today, you may know Steve also from his community, Sales Hall of Fame, and also from his podcast, Outside Sales Talk. However, what you might not know about Steve, and I didn't know this before we actually agreed to do a webinar together, is that, I always wanted to know who is this person that is the best sales executive at Google and how does he look like. So Steve was also the best performing top sales enterprise executive at Google in 2009. Only to actually leave Google and start his own company, Badger Maps. And right now, today, his company is the leading app for field salespeople. So, Steve, if I missed anything, I would love to hear from you and quick intro from you as well, and then we can get started with our show today.
No, I appreciate that, Nadia. I guess I'm out of Utah today. I usually live in Los Angeles, but I'm visiting our Utah offices today, and I'm excited to be here. I guess a little background on me. I got you mentioned the most interesting things about me, I think.
I stole your intro.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I guess background on me. I worked at IBM and then Google and then started Badger Maps about 10 years ago. And I've kind of been focused on solving the problems of field salespeople with Badger really ever since. We've got European offices that I spent a lot of time in, so I get to be in your neck of the woods quite a bit. I mean, you lived in Spain a little while, right?
Yeah, I've lived in Spain for 2.5 years. I know you have an office in Granada that I'm probably going to come and visit one day because I love Spain. I'm moving there as soon as I can. But tell me, you're in the office right now. So after a year and something of being stuck at home and working remotely, managing a team remotely as well, how is the feeling right now to be in the new office surrounded by your teammates?
The team is really excited. We've had the Salt Lake offices kind of partially open for a couple months, but I think this is kind of the full launch. Of course, the internet crashed. We had to bring the people who run the internet in this morning to fix that. But it's great to be back. The Spain offices were kind of easing back in as well. We've got them kind of partially opened, so it's an exciting time.
Amazing. And tell me, you mentioned that I'm quite curious actually to know how going from Google, what actually prompted you to actually start Badger Maps, and what were the challenges that you were facing and seeing on the market that actually inspired you to start this business, and actually what are the challenges you see field salespeople are facing today that you can actually that you're solving, that you're seeing still happening even after COVID, pre-COVID. So shine a light a bit for us on that.
Sure, yeah. So I guess when I was at Google, I'd like to describe myself as like a super creative, brilliant founder of a software company, but actually that's not the truth. I was at Google and I was working a lot with their mapping APIs, and I was also working with their mobile stuff a lot. And at the time, the internet on mobile devices wasn't slow enough to do the kind of stuff we're doing today. The actual mobile devices weren't slow enough. When I started Badger, we knew what the specs were going to be for the next version of the iPad, and that was going to be fast enough and strong enough. But phones weren't muscular enough at that time to actually run software like this. But I could kind of see the trends, and I could see the way things were speeding up, both on the internet side and on the mobile device side, and also with the Google Maps API. And so I could kind of see, okay, well, when these three things are a little faster, we're really going to be able to solve some important problems that field salespeople have had forever since the Silk Road, 2,000 years ago. They've had these problems, and we're finally going to be able to solve them in a really cool way, and integrate with CRMs and kind of make the CRM come to life for field salespeople. And so we kind of started out just doing the little things at first. All the original version did, and this must have taken us a year to actually get it to do on the old mobile devices. But we would just put someone's territory on the map for them, so they could see where all their customers were, and see where they were, and then kind of use that to eyeball what they could and what they should be doing that day, and they could click and see the information about each customer on each little pin, But then, so we hadn't added anything that we did, the routing, the leads, the scheduling stuff. None of that was the CRM integrations. None of that existed yet. But just even the basic stuff, we were able to start selling, and then we made it better and better over time. And I think the second part of your question was how things have moved during COVID times, how our customers are.
We can cover that. I want to go deep into that subject, obviously, on today's call. But before we go into that, obviously, you're a founder, you're in sales, you're still doing sales, obviously. Our community right now, I know a lot of people watching us are coming either from our founders or sales or in marketing. So for all of you listening, let us know in the comments, actually on the live chat, either you're a founder or sales or in marketing. That way we might be able to adapt our approach a bit in our conversations to your needs. I would love to hear from you and actually see who is watching and hearing us today. But what really, really interests me, actually, Steve, what you mentioned is that you found Badger Maps, and as it evolved, obviously your app is built for field salespeople. And me coming from as an inside salesperson, obviously, as you can hear from my accent, I come from Serbia. So and I'm working for American companies, foreign companies, meaning that the only field sales that I can do today is actually on a field. Talking to sheep in Serbian agriculture. Now I'm quite interested to understand before, and I know a lot of users here, a lot of listeners here are actually in inside sales. So I'm quite interested to understand the difference between what are the differentiators and what are some common things that you see between inside and outside sales. Maybe let's get that covered first and then go into a bit specifics.
Sure, yeah, and I think this is actually something that it's a great question, because a lot of people don't think enough about outside sales in technology these days. I think there's kind of a reflex that inside sales and talking on the phone with people is the only way we can sell software and technology services, which really isn't the case. I think it's really in many industries, people have figured out, more mature industries, people have figured out, well, the best way to do this is to meet people face to face, show up in person, build a relationship, understand each other better than over the phone. And really, the technology hasn't changed for forever, really. I mean, like whether you're on a Zoom call or a phone call, you're kind of listening to each other's voices to communicate and really make a connection. And if you're in sales, sell something. There's for the last, and I'm not sure when this was, but maybe when I started my career in sales, selling technology, and this is 2006, it was the title was outside sales. They specifically knew the way we sell this technology. This was at IBM. The way we sell this technology is to go out and meet with the people that we're selling it to in person. And then I was at Autonomy, which had one of the first SaaS products after IBM, and I think right around that time was when we kind of saw a shift to selling over the phone more often, because the price point was lower on it and it was sold on a monthly basis. So people almost didn't feel like it was worth it to go out and get in front of customers. And that's something that certainly at Badger Maps we deal with, right? Like our product is $50 a month, right? So is that really worth spending, you know, $400 on a round trip ticket across the country, or and then you know, a hotel and just the time that it takes? Is that you need a large deal to do that, and a lot of them pay monthly, and so it doesn't feel like it's worth it. But
Mm,
really, when you think about it, if it's really more important, I think, to look at the total value of the relationship over time. You know, what's the lifetime value? What are we going to collect from this relationship over the entire length of it? We
mm,
should be thinking about that when we think about the upfront investment. It may
mm,
be you know, even if it's only $50 a month, if they're going to pay you for 10 years and they've got 100 licenses that they're going to be paying for at $50 a month,
mm,
all of a sudden it very quickly becomes worth flying. You know, I'm in California across to Florida to sit down and have a meeting and buy someone dinner and take them out to drinks. And I think that's something that we don't think about enough in technology, is the value of the relationship. Really, I, for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's easier to truly understand someone and get to know them and have a more candid conversation face
mm,
to face
mm,
than just in a formal presentation over the internet. So I think one is not necessarily better than the other, but they're different tools that you want to use at
mm,
different times. You know, when you know, if you're, and if you do have a product that is only worth, you know, $2,000 a year, it is harder to fly around and sell it. But if it's a product that you're collecting $10,000 a year, now all of a sudden it
it
becomes
makes sense.
worthwhile to staff your sales team to flying around the country, right?
Exactly, exactly. And you mentioned a lot. What really sounded interesting to me while you were speaking about this is that the fact you kept mentioning building relationships and the relationship moment of field sales, and I feel that field sales, actually outside sales teams, he really nailed down the moment of building relationship much sooner and much before we actually inside sales team did. So what you were seeing in the previous years is that out of a sudden there's all this talk about, you know, building relationships, building relationships. Inside sales team need to adapt their cold emails to make them personalized, their cold calls to make them personalized, to really build the relationship. Social selling and all of this building relationships moment is right now getting to be accepted within the inside sales teams, and it's something that field sales have been doing for years now. So I think right now we're kind of getting a bit more aligned on this and actually putting back that building relationship moment in the center front. So what interests me in this moment is that when COVID happened, obviously, and the pandemic happened, you were out of the option to actually go and talk to these customers in person. So with your customers and with yourself, maybe, how did you see this change affected field sales reps, and how did they overcome it? What were the best strategies for that?
Well, yeah, you know, this was obviously bad for a lot of businesses, but it was it the pandemic affected different businesses based on the type of business they do in different ways, right? If you own a bar, or therefore if you sell beer to bars, you're in deep trouble, right? Depending on what country you're in, I guess. But because the different parts of the world treated this very differently. But um, you know, I think for a, for our customers, a lot of them did go out of business or furloughed their sales team. Um, and it was really based less on, and all of our customers are obviously in field sales, um, but for us it was really based on what industry you were in. So if
Mm,
you were in, you know, the medical device industry or the pharmaceutical industry, you were able to keep meeting with doctors face to face, and it was just a different set of protocols that you were using when you did it. You were wearing a mask and you were, you know, socially distancing, etc. But for our customers that sold beer to bars or sold exercise equipment to gyms, they, or, you know, glass. I remember talking to a guy who sold glassware to hotels, you know, things like that. Those businesses often went out of business or furloughed their employees, or shut down in some way. So I think it really, you know, it was less about what they could do or how they could manage the situation, because if there were just certain companies that were in trouble from
mm,
a just, no one's going to buy exercise equipment right now. Now
mm,
some were able to pivot in a cool way, and we did see some do that, like um, distributors of makers of beer that stopped selling beer to
mm,
bars but found other ways to get beer to the end consumer. Maybe they cut, you know, had a relationship with an apartment complex that they could come and
Mhm.
have the ability to sign up to have beer delivered directly to their house,
Mhm.
things like that. Selling exercise equipment to apartment buildings instead of gyms. So they some companies were able to rethink about who their customer was going to be during these times and
Mhm.
focus on them. For us, we ended up so during COVID, we lost a lot of customers in the beginning because they just disappeared. So that was probably about 20% of our customers, and then we lost customers throughout that next year. But at the same rate, we were adding new customers. So we ended up just flat from a business perspective. But that was because we focused on the people that did have kind of essential, that were a part of essential industries. So
Mhm.
for us, it was not trying to sell things to people selling beer to bars. It was shifting all our energies into people selling things like medical devices or construction equipment, things that were happening even during COVID times. And so
Perfect.
that's how we reacted, which I think was the second part of your question.
Yeah, so basically, your from what I'm hearing is that your kind of first tactic to tackle right now the new pandemic and new situation that you've faced was to actually identify and rethink your ICP, so ideal customer profile, and really dig into which verticals right now are in need of your services. Is this something that you see that obviously this was a, unexpected situation that we've been through, but obviously the world is shifting constantly, and we might end up with having new crisis. It might not be COVID, hopefully not once more. But what do you feel like for companies when things like this happen, unexpected circumstances, and just changes in the market? What do you feel makes companies successful in being agile and being able to adapt to the new circumstances? Since obviously, as you said, like you need to rethink your ICP, really focus on how your product is going to help out this new world that we're basically selling to right now.
Well, I think what you're saying is super important. And I think Charles Darwin has my favorite quote about this. I forget exactly how it goes, but it's something like the the creatures that survive are not the necessarily the strongest or the smartest, but they're the most adaptable creatures, the
Mm,
ones that are able to change with the changing times.
mm,
And I think that's really true in business. And like you say, if not this, then it's something else causing us to change. It could just be competitive pressures. It could be the changing
mm,
marketplace. It could be technology changing. Um, the way we approach problems and approach how we do things, I think we should always be looking to change. I think, it was a pretty easy shift for us. I mean, we didn't have to really change our ICP that much. I mean, it was more of just a Zoom pivot, if anything. Like, it was a refocusing, and we knew that it was a temporary refocusing. Now we're kind of back to selling to all these guys already, but um, we already had a ton of customers in the industries that we were focusing on, and so it was just a matter of kind of the outbound efforts that we were doing, just focusing them on those areas, and I guess doubling down on helping our customers that we already had be successful, so that they wouldn't leave, right? So
mm.
helping them stay afloat,
So what
or,
did
or
you how
or
did you
do
actually
things differently.
How did you actually help them out? That's quite curious to me to hear when it comes to the, keeping in the time of crisis. Obviously, you want to make sure that your client retention is actually high and that you're keeping your current customers happy, that you're actually helping them thrive and go through this mess with your help, obviously. So what were the ways that you've kind of helped out your clients when they were struggling? What were some of the tactics that you used at that time?
Well, it's funny because one of the things I did, we've just been talking about, like I kind of reached out to customers that were important to us, and well, I guess they're all important to us, but sitting down with them over Zoom messages last June and July and times like that. Um, I would talk to them and ask and kind of talk to them about this exact topic, like how to rethink who they're going after, how to,
Mm,
and and just kind of have a conversation around that and how show them how we can help them do that with our product, because we have tools within Badger that help people focus on certain, certain areas, and like different customer areas. For example, like if they were selling exercise equipment to gyms predominantly, we could also help them find where all the apartment buildings were that had gyms, or all the hotels that had gyms that maybe could use a refresh. Because a lot of hotels were like using this time to do construction and stuff and redo things. So things along those lines, helping them rethink who they were going to approach, and showing them how we could help them do that. And so I guess you could call that free consulting. You could call that just touching base with your customers and creating value where you can. But I think that's something for all business leaders to do in all times. Really, the customers that you can keep that open dialogue with. Talk to them about things, and frankly, a lot of times, if you're in a sales role, or if you're like I do, I provide a product for field sales teams. I'm an expert in certain areas of their business, and I know how adjacent industries are doing things. I know how their industry I might know how their competitors are approaching problems. I might know there are a bunch of things that I might have access to, just because I've had 10,000 conversations with people that are involved in field sales teams. So I may be able to help see around corners for them, or give them ideas. And I think that's important for all salespeople to think about: is how can you be an expert in every element, or as many elements as possible, of your customer's business? If you sell things to dentist offices, you might not just be you might sell a laser to whiten teeth for dentist offices, but you may, because you talk to dentists all the time, you also may know about accounting nuances for dentistry, or parking, and how people deal with parking problems around their offices, or whatever it is, the types of challenges that your customer might face, because you've talked to 300 customers just like them. You may know things that are valuable for them, and so sharing them and providing that value is a great strategy.
I completely agree with you. And what you've said right now, just being a consultant for your current clients, and making sure that you're actually giving them valuable advice, and making sure that your clients are growing with you. Obviously, the growth of your company itself depends entirely on the success of your clients, and the companies that realize that are the ones that are actually succeeding. And I feel that when COVID actually hit, we had that moment where you had two ways, companies that are either panicked, and they went and sold, like discounts and free seats, and like just anything to get more and more customers, just started inventing new approaches that were not so new, but just like scared to actually start losing the customers and trying to push more on the revenue. And the other ones who actually kind of taken a pause and started thinking, okay, how do we make our current clients survive this? How do we go through this together? And actually, you mentioned the networking and consulting calls. One of our best sequences at lemlist, actually, and the best campaigns that we've had, was actually the one that we did for, as you said, like consultancy work for in the time that COVID hit. So we reached out to all of our client base. We offered like free consultations on their outbound to help them adapt to the new world and figure out their ICP. And that's why a lot of our customers stayed, even though obviously the budget and just in general the economics were not in the perfect state. I want to go back to what you said before about the technology in the field sales and how it wasn't used back then. Right now, with the changes that we've had in the previous year, do you feel the technology is being more used, and that it has that field salespeople are maybe more open to using it right now, after not being able to actually go face to face, and obviously had to start using Zoom and all of these digital tools that they probably didn't use before?
Yeah, I think there's been, in general, over the last 20 years, maybe 30. I don't even know. People are more and more able and more willing to adopt new pieces of technology, and I think depending on where you are in the world, depending on, I think there's generational differences on this. There are certain generations that are just very willing to adopt new technology, and that's a generalization, obviously. some 70-year-olds adapt to new technology very readily, and some 24-year-olds don't adapt to technology very well. But in general, I think we've seen a trend that as the baby boomer generation kind of yields control to Generation X. Generation X has a much higher willingness to adopt technology, and a lot of times we actually see technology be adopted from someone who's a millennial or in Gen Y, and in an organization, and they'll join. We've actually seen like people right out of college be the reason that a whole company that has needed something like us forever and has never even looked at it, someone who just starts straight out of school and they learn about the job of outside sales, and they'll run into some of the problems or challenges with it, and their immediate reaction is, there's got to be an app for that. There's no way we should be doing it this way. And so they'll search around and in 2 seconds find us and on the internet, and then they'll just get us alone, and then as they experience success with it, they'll show it to their manager, who then gets it for the whole team, and then it spreads to the division, and then it spreads to the whole company. And we've seen that adoption pattern a lot, and like you say, I think COVID has accelerated certain types of technology, I believe. It has certain types of technology adoption, and we'll see how much that sticks or not, right? I mean, I think
my following question. Exactly. Do you feel like the field sales rep right now are more open to actually continuing to use it, or they're just waiting to get back on track and just continue what they've been doing before?
Yeah, I think it just kind of depends on the technology. I think when technology really creates value and makes people's lives more efficient, I think they really jump on it and adopt it and keep it. I think certain technologies we've seen really grow much larger during the pandemic probably wouldn't be adopted. Probably won't stay as the norm. I mean, I personally, I don't feel like I get that much more out of a conversation just because I can see the person's face in a little square on my screen than I do if I'm on the phone with them. So a lot of times, like especially like in half of the time when I'm talking to someone on the phone, it's an internal call. So it's within the company. I don't need to see people's faces, right? And I think it creates a certain amount of fatigue to stare at all these little squares on your screen, which really aren't that interesting. And there's seeing the face of someone that I know, talking at me, doesn't create that much value. But for me, I think maybe for other people, they really enjoy it. I think so. Depending, I think for some meetings, we'll keep doing Zooms instead of phone calls. But I think maybe in some cases we'll fall back to phone calls. We'll see. But I don't think that across the board with my customer base, I would say that the people that we're meeting with, if the best way to sell your product or solution before COVID was face to face, it still probably is in almost every case. Because we had all these abilities. We had the ability to set up a phone call before COVID or a Zoom call before COVID. Companies are smart. People are smart. If that was the best way to sell before COVID, they would have already been doing it. This technology's, I mean, when did we get WebEx? 15 years ago. So I don't think any of this is necessarily new. So if that was the best way, if in person was the best way to do things before COVID, it probably is now. And if a webinar is the best way to do it before COVID, it probably still is. And I think things do shift over time. Some things are just constant though, right? Like you guys do a ton of email marketing. If I had $1 for every time I've heard someone say, "Oh, email marketing's dead. We shouldn't do it anymore. It's just a waste of time." It's like, or it's going to die. And they've always been totally wrong. It's still one of the best ways to get ideas in front of people. And I think that's kind of, I don't think it changes for a long time. I mean, text messages and emails are the way we fundamentally communicate, and so getting new ideas and engaging people over those channels is highly effective, and I suspect will remain highly effective.
Perfect. We have some questions from the audience, but I also want to highlight that if anybody has any questions for Steve or for me, feel free to drop them in the comments in the live chat. I'm quite curious to hear what your questions are. One of the questions were about the agility. We already covered that, but as we kind of what we've touched upon about, like, millennials right now going into the new offices, into the new companies, and then completely making a change. What we're seeing also in the inside sales, and I feel like that evolves in every single department within any company, is really the moment when you think outside of the box and are able to really be agile in the way that you're just coming up with new approaches and not sticking to the approaches that maybe your manager even given you. Thinking outside of the box and coming up with ways to differentiate yourself is really where the magic happens. And that's why we see it with millennials. They're like coming super young, super motivated. They want to change the world. And that's when they're open to kind of adapting new technology, adapting new tools, coming up with new strategies. But what would be your advice? Like you've had such an amazing career and you've always were coming up with new approaches and testing out different strategies. How do you keep that spark, keep that way to be agile, keep coming up with new approaches and not kind of flow into the routine and get a bit lazy, I would say, even in your methodologies and strategies?
Well, I think, approaching things in new ways and being innovative, it's best to just try to bake that into your own mind and from a leadership perspective at a company, bake it into the company's way of doing things.
Mm.
I think being open to challenging the way something's being done, or asking how long we're going to do this for, or when new ideas or technologies come out, new ways of doing things come available. I think you just have to ask you have to be asking yourself all the time, what are we going to lose by not taking a look at this? What do we stand? What could we potentially not get? And that's a helpful way to look at things, because people just instinctually hate losing things. We hate losing things more than we like gaining things. So if
Mm.
you frame it to yourself, or you frame it to your organization in a perspective of, what do we stand to lose a month by not doing this? Or could we, and I guess conversely, you could think about, well, what are our competitors going to gain if every month if they look at this and we don't? And I
Mm.
think if you have to be agile, you have to be adaptive, you have to try new things, you have to test things out. If you don't, I think you really end up it's hard to stay in a leadership position if
Mm.
you aren't always looking to improve what you're doing, do it better, faster. Look at new technologies that enable that, look at new processes, look at new ways of approaching problems.
That's amazing. And you mentioned that like you first start with actually implementing that mindset into your own mind and then leading by the example. But the question now comes is, when you're remote, which you were for a couple of months, even more, how do you actually managing a remote team and then leading by the example, having that mindset? How do you then pass it over to your team, potentially new even hires that you've hired while you're remote? So how did you manage remote hiring, generally, like team motivation and getting that mindset of being flexible, having the entrepreneurial mindset within your team during the epidemic?
Well, I think the culture was largely for us implanted before
Mm.
the pandemic. We the culture of innovation, the way of approaching things. I think that the pandemic feels like a big heavy wet blanket over everything. In terms of leadership during those times, I think it really all comes down to transparency and communication. I
Mm.
think communication is so important during a crisis of this nature, or any crisis, or any time of change. Um, People's imaginations get the best of them,
Mm.
and particularly within large groups, there's the gossip of impending doom. Um, you know, it, we had a lot of really worried employees back in April of 2020, right? I mean, field sales was not going to be able to do what field sales does, at least for some period of time that was unclear. And and we didn't know what we were looking at, and all of our customers are field salespeople. So there was real fear that our revenue streams were going to be completely interrupted, and therefore we
Mm.
wouldn't be able to pay people, et cetera. Um, so I think it was really important that I wrap my head around the situation and I communicated in a transparent way, in a realistic way, right? I had to be truthful and honest and open and call it like I saw it, but also in an optimistic way, right? Like and show people, hey, this looks real bad, but we'll get through this. This is, pandemics come to an end. This may take a while, but we'll get through it. And I think I had to lay out an action plan that would put people's fears to rest and let them focus on doing what they were doing, whether it was selling our product, whether it was making improvements to the product, whether it was working on the marketing of the product, whatever it was. And to help them put their fears aside, let them know, hey, we're going to get through this. We've got these resources to get through it, and it's all going to be fine in the end here. We just have to wait this thing out to some degree, and people want safety, they want security, and in a difficult time like a pandemic, as a business leader or any type of leader, probably you're responsible for the base layer of their pyramid of needs, right? So I'm talking about the money they pay for food in their home with, their health care. Well, I guess healthcare not in most places in Europe, but in America, a business leader is in charge of the healthcare of the people that work for them.
Perfect.
And you're in charge of their long-term financial security, right? And so you've got to make them feel secure and safe in that stuff.
I love it. I love the pyramid of needs, as you mentioned. That is so true when you're a leader, and you will, like we've touched upon the employee retention at the end. Like if you would give it a term. So in the moment, like in the last year, April 2020, you had a moment where you need to kind of make sure that your team is feeling secure, that they're feeling safe. But after a year, right now, if you know the phenomena, we've talked about it briefly about, the great resignation, where people after a year, they've been balancing out whether their job is fulfilling them enough, if the work-life balance between your team, in your team and in the company, is actually good enough for them to stay. They just in general went more internal and they started evaluating their lives. So right now, as a leader, how do you face have you kind of changed a bit some of your approaches, or has the previous year changed the way that you're thinking about your employees? Have you implemented some new techniques, some new tools, maybe some meditation sessions? I'm just kind of randomly throwing out the typical techniques that we're seeing. But what are you right now doing to kind of keep your team happy, motivated? It's been a hard year. How do you put that motivation right now after the horrible year that we all had?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in terms of motivation, a lot of things are the same as they've always been. It's culture. It's making people feel appreciated. It's paying them fairly. It's listening to their needs. It's providing an opportunity for them to grow and develop and learn and build their careers. But I think that there's a couple things going on right now that I think are kind of underlying in your question. So first, there's the great resignation, where, like, I think there's a couple things that are driving what we're seeing there. But just in terms of people feeling like they don't want to do what they were doing, I think it is just a tough time, and it's you have to communicate with people and hear them and listen to them, because I think it's been a depressing year and a half. It's been a boring year and a half. It's been a tragic year and a half. It's been a scary year and a half. And I think a lot of people are just out of juice. They're just out of energy, and they're feeling like they want to change. They want to change something, and changing a job or changing your career can feel temporarily, or maybe it's permanently the right thing to do, right? And it can. A lot of people, I think, end up in career paths that aren't necessarily something that they enjoy and something that they're good at. Their job is maybe. I think often your job ends up being something that you're good at or that you've learned to do. Like, not to pick on accountants, but a lot of people, when their day-to-day activity as an accountant is not the most exciting thing for them, or a lawyer, or whatever job that kind of you have a lot of training in, you choose the path maybe you chose the path because you know, you became an accountant because you knew it was a stable job and a good job, and you'd be able to, have a nice salary. But then when you actually, and you, or maybe you just took some classes in it as a part of business school, or your undergrad degree, and now you have these skill sets in it. And so when
Mm,
you go to get a job in the market, you end up in an accounting role. 5 years
mm,
later, maybe you're not super excited about that, right? Maybe you don't love what you do every day as an accountant, and the actual activity of being an accountant, and working with the spreadsheets and the figuring taxes out. Maybe that's just not exciting to you.
mm, mm.
Maybe you're good at it, but you don't enjoy it.
I
I would
love.
make, that's a great time to think about what else could I be doing with my life.
Mm,
Is and 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 I think that these times have caused people to reevaluate what they're doing with their lives, and I encourage them to. I think that's the right thing to do. And a lot of people end up in doing something for their whole career that isn't that exciting for them or isn't that fun, and they'd probably have a better life, even if it meant making less money, if they went a direction that was more rewarding for them.
I think
Um,
Steve, you've just inspired a bunch of people to rethink their jobs and possibly quit their careers. But for me, well, like what I'm getting out of all of this conversation is, don't get stuck. Don't get stuck in fear. Don't get stuck with what you currently are at. Be brave to accept new approaches, new technology, new potential jobs. Rethink. Go like do some self work, some inner work. Really reflect on what is happening around you, what is happening within your organization, what can be changed, and constantly kind of think about it. Not only when it's COVID, when it's pandemic, when it's crisis, constantly just continue doing that. Create that culture within your organization and within your mind in the first place, because you're leading by the example. And then everything else can fall in place. You're going to get more agile. You're going to be able to adapt to new situations, and you're just going to be fine with yourself and that you've done your best. Steve, for the last question that I have for you today to wrap up this show, it was a lovely conversation also. Uh, if you were to summarize some of the new outside sales trends that you think are gonna that we're gonna be seeing from now on, and I'm gonna be taking a bit more closer look to our outside sales reps. What do you think there are actually, and how the outside sales is gonna evolve?
well, I think you know if you asked a Zoom sales rep, they would tell you that field sales is dead. But I think that's incorrect. I think field sales is definitely not dead. And I think, face-to-face meetings for many different types of business and certain types of sales will remain one of the major ways that people bring things to market.
Mhm.
Um, I think it shortens sales cycles, deepens relationships, and will always be important, is my guess. Um, Now, that being said, there are still so many amazing new technology tools to generate leads or to manage certain elements of the sales role that I think throughout this period in history, as more and more of them come to market, more services and technologies become available to do these things, more and more that's a change that we'll see in the marketplace, is more and more adoption of things that enable the sales rep to be better, or enable the customer or the prospect to evaluate whether they want to have a relationship with you better. I think that there's information marketplaces and ways of getting information, and companies are just becoming more transparent, and there's reviews of what the company is like. Communities where people can communicate and be brought together to discuss these things. And I think all those things will continue to be embraced more and more over in kind of this period, this post-pandemic period, and that's a trend that we've been seeing for a long time. Um, I think from a perspective of field sales, like you know, to get back to your question, what changes will we see? I think there is, when you're in a room with someone, you can just read their objections better. You can gauge how they truly feel about things, about your product, about your services. You can sense objections, and that's something that you can really only do if you're in the room with them. It's a lot harder to do
Always Zoom.
over Zoom or over the a phone call as well. I mean, it's hard to read the room, and I think it's hard to empathize as well with someone who's just a talking head, right? Like if
Mhm.
we were sitting in the same room together right now with all of our listeners, there's just more of a connection, I think, right? And certainly one on one, when people are selling things to other people, or considering making a business relationship, it's powerful to be in the same room with them. So bottom line, I don't think we'll see that change a ton in the near future. I think, as the world is opening up here, things will, in 2 years, things will feel a lot more like 2019 than they'll feel like 2020. Let's put it that way.
And it's not so bad, I would say. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us today. It was lovely chatting with you. Hope we'll have you soon on our webinars. Thank you all to all of you listeners. Hope you enjoyed the chat. If you have any questions for me, Steve, how can actually the audience get in touch with you or contact you if they have any questions on Badger Maps or just want to get some insights from you?
Yeah, sure. Well, if hearing more stuff about field sales is interesting and learning about that, I definitely recommend my podcast, Outside Sales Talk. If you were in field sales and wanted to learn more about what Badger Maps does, or I'd recommend just going to our website and kind of getting an overview of the different things we do, badgermapping.com. If it's me that you're trying to reach out to, LinkedIn's a great way to do that. Just search Steve Benson, Badger Maps. I'm easy to find. But yeah, those are probably the best ways to get in touch with me and the different things that I do.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Steve, again. Thank you, audience, and enjoy your day if it's just getting started, or if not, have a lovely evening, and I'll see you on the next lemlist